Welcome back again after our break, and we are now going to continue on with our attitude. And it is just amazing how we can see these concepts can affect us emotionally and can affect our health. These are all emotions that we deal with on a daily basis. And if we don't tend to them, if we don't look at each single one of them on a daily basis, like I suggested last week, we look at a new start, the whole acronym every single day. What is it that you left off for the day? Then you will start seeing why your body is so sick, why your mind tends to think the thoughts that you are thinking. So we want to be able to master this acronym, a new start. And I love calling it a new start because it is a new start for each one of us as we come to the understanding of this new start. I think it's a very, very powerful acronym to look at, to work with, so that we can, just relate on a daily basis to other people as well. So now we're going to look at our next part of our training. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the eagle and the lion. You see, our Creator identified himself with these two amazing creatures. But I want to look at what is the nature and the attitude of these two creatures. The eagle is the king of the bird kingdom, and the lion is the king of the animal kingdom. I listened to this spoken of by Dr. Miles, and I found it to be really an incredible story for our minds, for the power of attitude, because these two birds have incredible attitudes. The king of the birds is the eagle, and the eagle shows that he's the king as he is swooping through the air. He doesn't care about all the little birds that come up and fly next to him. He has an attitude of, I am king. He doesn't even bother to look. All he's focused on, and I say focus because his focal points, his eyes are the most incredible magnifiers that you can ever come across. And I actually have... because I have not been feeling well, I'd actually forgotten to write down all the major points that I wanted to talk about regarding the eagle. However, the eagle is an amazing bird, and he is the king of the birds, of the bird kingdom. And then we have the king of the animal kingdom, which is the lion. The lion has a spirit of leadership, and the word spirit is referencing attitude. He has the attitude of a leader. A leader has an attitude that makes him or her different to followers. The lion is not the tallest animal in the world, is he? No, he isn't. The tallest animal is the giraffe, and I'm looking at the African animals because, as some of you may know, that's where I come from. But the giraffe stands way above, way taller than the lion, but the giraffe does not have the attitude of a lion, not even half the attitude of a lion. In fact, the giraffe will run away from a lion, and the giraffe are very, very, I call them soft animals. I've been very, very close to giraffe in Africa when I was living there. The elephant is much, much bigger than the lion. He is the largest animal in the African jungle. And he runs when a lion comes, when a lion approaches him. And you wonder, why is that? Why would a lion be able to chase an elephant? Look at the size of this animal. I was very close to an elephant too, very, very, very close. In fact, I've had two experiences with the elephant. One, we were driving as teenagers, and we were in the back of a van, a bakkie, and the driver was one of our friends. We were all working together at the Victoria Falls. Some of you may have heard of it. I worked there when I was a teenager. And the elephants were starting to cross the road behind us. So he stopped, he reversed, and he started revving the vehicle just to scare us in the back of the ute. And we started screaming because the elephants, they give signs. They actually swoop their ears, and then they warning. They lift their heads like they're bucking, and then they do that twice. The third time, they raise their trunk and they blow, woo, and then they chase. And he did that. And I was in the back really worried, because if the car had cut off, that elephant would have minced us, because elephants have been known to do that to vehicles on the roads in Africa. And that was one experience. The second experience I had was where I thought, wow, elephants, gentle giants. We were camping. We were traveling from through Africa. When I was 20, I left Africa in a Land Rover, and I drove the whole way to Switzerland. But we were in a park, and a beautiful, beautiful animal park where we were camping, and the elephants were coming up through the campsite. And all the tourists, we used to run, jump back in our vehicles, and just sit there till the elephants were gone through. And this particular day, we jumped in the vehicle, and I was lying in the Land Rover looking through the window, and the elephant came right up to the window, and his eye and my eye were eye to eye. And do you think I was afraid? Absolutely. All I could think of, what if he gets angry and wants what is in the vehicle? He's going to turn us over. So I closed my eyes and I prayed and I prayed. And that was an amazing experience. He walked around the car, and we had a tent next to the Land Rover, and he jumped over the lines of the tent without even bumping it. They are amazing creatures. However, my story is more about the lion now. So I just wanted to share that amazing story about the elephant with you. The lion is not the heaviest. The rhinoceros is. The rhinoceros is by far the heaviest animal in the African jungle. And an army of sheep led by a lion can defeat an army of lions led by a sheep. And that's an African proverb. You may have heard it said before. So powerful leadership can walk into a camp of very depressed people, and within 20 minutes, they are turned into unbelievable and powerful armies, because leadership determines everything. And the lion is the king of the jungle only because of one thing, and that's because of his attitude. The lion has a very, very, very incredible attitude, and we need to start looking at our own attitudes on a daily basis. What does our attitude do for us? The lion has that attitude that makes every animal afraid of him. We don't want to lead by fear, but it does take respect for you to become a leader. And when I use the word fear in the jungle, we're talking about respect. The elephant respects the lion. The hyena respects the lion. The giraffe respects the lion. And what makes these massive animals respect such a small animal in terms of some of their sizes is his attitude. Attitude is the difference. For example, a lion will see an elephant, and the thing that counts with mind is one word. The lion is thinking, that is going to be my food. And the answers to the dilemma is this: because leadership can transform cowards into violent warriors, the right kind of leadership can transform a timid into bold people. And that's what we want. We don't want to be leading by fear. We don't want to be leading by violence. We want to be leading by a transformed and a timid heart, but goodness and grace. We want to be filled with all the wonderful attributes that we can have if we think seriously about who we are, what we do, how we speak, how we respond to people, how gracious we are with people. And you know, everything that we do in life will make a difference if we think of others and their feelings. Attitude is the difference. For an example, a lion, like I said, sees an elephant, but what does he see? He sees food. I could eat this thing, and he acts the way he thinks. I could eat it. So if I get it, it's my food. And now, another amazing mystery is that the elephant is a very powerful animal. He's also much more intelligent than the lions. But when elephant sees the lion, one word comes to mind: this is an eater. So his attitude is an attitude that's already been overrun. He's already in fear because he sees this lion that he knows can eat him if he catches him. I wonder if the elephant turned things around and thought, lion, stampede, because they are so massive. Their skin is so thick and hard. Surely if a lion tried to jump on them, they could use their tusks. They could use their nose, they could use their legs to stampede the elephant. However, when they see an elephant, their mind is, this is an eater, I need to run. The attitude is a product of belief. You cannot have an attitude beyond what your own belief is. Your beliefs will get you stuck in a rut. So your attitude comes from your belief system. The lion is the king because of what he believes about himself, not because of what the others think of him in terms of he's only a small little fella, but because they see him as a killer machine and he sees himself as the strongest in the animal world. But as I said, he's actually not really the strongest when you look at size, weight, and skin and everything to do with animals. The lion has fur over his skin, which is not as hard as an elephant. However, what do you believe of yourself? Don't be a victim of negative self-talk. Remember, you are listening, and that is what makes the difference in the animal kingdom, because in the animal kingdom we know that there's a killing machine out there that thinks a great deal of himself. So I'm going to share a couple of very important things that I've learned along the way of negative self-talk, and I call it stinking thinking. Have you ever heard of Dr. Neil Nedley? Well, Dr. Neil Nedley is an amazing doctor, brain doctor in America. And when I was there and I came back and studied again with him, I'm a depression recovery, I've lost my train of thought, I'm sorry. I studied with him to be a director for depression recovery, because I know that there are many people out there who are extremely, extremely depressed. And I know that we can help them by just learning these simple tools, because thinking can defeat depression, or it can create depression. Drug medications for depression absolutely do not help. And I've learned this through Dr. Neil Nedley. We know that medication can cause a whole host of issues in our bodies, in our systems, and even in our brain. We know that taking these depressive medications can actually cause us to think even worse thoughts than we were thinking when depression first hit. We know that thinking negative thoughts, I think I had a slide before where I spoke about how the lady was thinking all these very negative thoughts about herself. And I gave you on the right-hand side of that image the positive thoughts that you can turn that stinking thinking to. And it definitely is stinking thinking, because when you are thinking, you're thinking very negatively of yourself, how can you do anything and become anything better when you are simply thinking you are nothing? Now, I used to think that of myself, as I said, when I was a teenager, because things happened. Things were done supposedly to help me, and unfortunately, they didn't quite do the job, because those thoughts that I was having of myself were all negative thoughts, and I really thought I couldn't do very much. So with the result, I went through life feeling really lost and feeling like I couldn't do it. And believe it or not, all my learning came in much later years. As a matter of fact, I only really started going to school in my late 40s when I'd already had 4 children. So I started to study. Those of you who were there last week heard me talk about how I was on medication for a year, and I had all sorts of ailments. I had chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and many other disorders that were definitely harming me more and more. And the medication didn't help me at all. It made me even more sick. So medication affected me and affected my mindset. However, I'm so happy that I made a decision that I was going to turn my life around, and I was going to start to study for myself. And that was only in 2000 and what year was it, when I really started going into deep studies, doing medicine. I did functional medicine. I did naturopathy, herbiology, oils. There's so much that I went to study, because I felt that things were so much better for me. I could see that those C's that I talked about first, the confidence I had picked up, and it's different for everybody. I actually had broken the misbeliefs that I had, and there was very deep misbeliefs that I used to go through on a daily basis, that I could not do things, that I'm a single mother, I have 4 children, who's going to respect me? I considered suicide, in fact, at a few points in my life. I was extremely anxious. I suffered severe anxiety. I went through very, very depressed moments and times, and I still had all the stinking thinking going on, and no one could help me. I went to see a doctor, and they said to me, go and see a psychologist. And they booked me to see a psychologist who was a young girl. Now, remember, I was in my 40s, and she was in her perhaps early 20s. And she started asking me a lot of questions. And in the end, it almost seemed that I was helping her. And that also gave me a bit of confidence, because I walked out of that meeting feeling she didn't help me at all, but I helped her. And the reason why I thought that was because she was asking me about my lifestyle and saying to me, how did you cope? Because I'm going overseas and I need to know this and I need to know that. Can you tell me what I should do? What do you think I should do? So I came to Australia. She was going to Europe, and I had just come from Europe. And so I know it wasn't about her talking to me to help me. She was talking to me to, asking me a lot of ways to help her. Maybe she was using reverse psychology and, helping me with my confidence. I have no idea. However, I came away knowing that I helped her in many ways, and that made me feel very good about myself and made me realize that I could help people. And the first thing I did was enroll in a psychology course. So it absolutely did help me to believe sorry, I lost my train of thought again. Sorry, can someone please just write this? COVID is not very easy. I'm sort of losing my train of thought all the time. I think I was talking about how it gave me confidence to know that absolutely. So I went and I enrolled in a psychology course, and I did a year of psychology, and I thought to myself, I'm not sure if psychology is for me. And then I enrolled in the Australian College of Natural Therapies. That was amazing. I learned so much there. I did massage, and I had a business lecturer who's become a good friend of mine. In fact, we just bumped into each other 2 weeks ago. She walked into my boutique in York, which was an amazing surprise. So I learned so much through going into different places. And I learned all about lifestyle matters. I learned how to look at what is unconsciously happening in my mind. And these are the tools that I started learning, and that I'd like for you all to start understanding and gaining the knowledge from. We have many amazing writers. We have many amazing doctors that have given us, like Dr. Nedley, amazing ways of getting out of the rut that we're in, perhaps kicking bad habits, because many of these things that we suffer, the emotions, the negative mindset that we have, is none other than through poor habits as well from childhood. We know that we have things that we experienced as children, as I said in the beginning, through our own parents and what they passed down to us, the negative self-talk. Now, that's somewhere I'd like to stay for a moment, and I'd like to focus on negative self-talk, because I know many of you may have or are experiencing negative self-talk through to your childhood, or through to just things that have happened to you as you were growing up. So my question, what do you believe about yourself? What do you tell yourself? Are you honest to yourself? Are you telling yourself lies? And what do I mean by that? Well, I'll give you a few examples. I know that I go through, or I was going through, no more now. I went through many stages where I told myself so many lies. I was saying things like, I'm never going to amount to anything because my childhood was so difficult in so many ways. Was that true? Absolutely not. I am helping so many people now, and I have been for many, many years. Although I really only started going to get educated in more recent years, I've been helping people since I was 20, doing the health reform work, helping little children as I was driving through Africa. And then I stopped for a while. But 25 years ago, I believe, I made a decision that I want to help people. So I used to help children, like I was explaining before, taking them off the streets. And I watched and listened to the way those children spoke, and they had no tools to cope with their negative self-talk, because I'd hear them say to each other, "Oh man, I hate my parents and the way they are at home. They're always fighting and they're always arguing. And, my life is such a mess. I'm always going to be living this way because I look at my neighbors and my neighbors are the same. And I look at, and I thought about this, and I wondered back then why they say their neighbors and their neighbors. Well, when you look at neighborhoods, you normally see neighborhoods are based on characteristics. People generally choose their neighborhoods based on either how much money they have or how much money they don't have. So you have some neighborhoods that are really poor. You have some neighborhoods that are really wealthy. And then if you go to certain neighborhoods, it's very drug oriented, a lot of alcohol going on. And sadly, that's where you see these children who are victims. Now, I'm very fortunate that I was not brought up in that type of home. Our home was very loving in many ways, but there was a lot of abuse at the same time. My mother was an amazing, amazing woman. She was a wonderful mother, but sadly, I couldn't say the same for my other parent. And I really am saddened for what she went through and what he put us through. And then another negative memory I have is at the age of 4, I was put into a boarding school, and that was not fun. I can tell you, it was the most horrible place to be. And I don't know if you agree with me, but children generally see what you would call ghosts and spooks and things like that. And I saw them every night in the dormitory where I slept. And I was so frightened. I couldn't even get up to go to the toilet, because every time I tried to get up to go to the toilet, I would see a spook standing next to the toilet. So I'd run back to my bed. So effectively, I became a bedwetter. And because of bedwetting, it was done not because I couldn't wake up. It was done because I was too frightened to go. So I had a routine. If I needed to use the toilet, I would go to the edge of my bed. Remember, I was 4 years old, and I would wet on one corner. If I needed to go again, I would go to the opposite side so that the middle of the bed was always dry enough for me to sleep. And I never slept very much because I would see things. I would hear noises. The other little kids who were my age too would be crying, and it was a very, very difficult time. So notwithstanding, that gave me a very difficult childhood, which actually impacted on my growing years and didn't help me as well, because I figured if my mum and dad put me into a boarding school at the age of 4, I must have been very naughty. I must have been a bad girl because they had to send me away. And that's the child the mindset of a child because we don't have the understanding. So we need to think about our children when we're doing certain things. And we as adults, when we've gone through these situations, we need to come back to reality. I'm no longer that child. I don't need to think those thoughts any longer. My attitude is what's going to get me to my final destination, because attitude is going to work on my thought process. What I'm going to think is going to impact how I respond or react to certain situations. So that little girl that went to boarding school at 4 years of age was a very miserable, a very sad little girl who thought she wasn't loved, who thought she was probably very bad, and that's why she was sent home. And then school holidays, there was abuse and there was things going on, and it certainly was a very difficult childhood. But I am so grateful for everything that I learned growing up, because I can look back now and I can say to that little girl, because we need to remember that part of you is still subconsciously going to jump out now and again in certain situations. You will see it when you come to your adult years and you may feel rejected for one reason or another. You will definitely feel rejection more than other adults, because they were never sent to boarding school. They were loved, they were protected, they felt loved and they felt protected. Because I didn't feel the love and the protection that I needed at the age of 4, every time I've gone through rejection, it's been more difficult for me. And because of that, I need to be very careful that I don't project my own emotions onto others because I'm rejected for a good reason. I need to remember, I need to think as the adult and not the little girl, and say, Michele, you are an adult. You are not being rejected. It is just because this is not for you that they're not going to accept you or take you or invite you or whatever that might be. However, I have realized in situations I have to date, I feel rejection really. It hits me in my heart. Even, recently I've had things happen where I felt so rejected that it made me feel a bit stressed up. I had to remind myself where that was coming from. So now we're going to focus a little bit about that mindset so that you can all get the understanding and get your own thought process going. Feel free to write anything here for me that you may want to write down. There is a lot of situations that you may have gone through, and I might be awakening some of them that you didn't even know was there, that you didn't even realize you were feeling or struggling. So think about your life. You don't have to write it down at all. I am teaching you this because I want you to be the leader that you are meant to be. Did you know we are all meant to be leaders? Because they are all beginners. And if there are many beginners, they need a leader. And if we have good leadership in the world, we are going to have good communities. We're going to have great children. We're going to have and see people that are confident, that cope well. All those 7 C's we're going to see in these little people growing up. And we can help single parents. We can help, mothers. I was alone with my 4 children, and I never really had any help because the help that they give you, if you go to the government Centrelink, they send you to people who are not really geared for this. If you take note, they employ people who sometimes have no life experience at all, and they cannot help someone like me, who's had a lot of life experience, when they coming from a book. Now, I'm not being biased, because there are many amazing counselors who have actually I have spoken to along the way, but most of those counselors that were fabulous counselors always had a life behind them of learning. They were married, they had children, they were rejected at some point. They had learning. They may still have been in happy marriages, so on and so forth, but they had learning nevertheless behind them where they could understand. So what's the purpose of you being a good leader, a good teacher, and a good helper, a good counselor, is because you can understand. If you remember before, on one of my slides, I said to you that you need understanding. There's no point in trying to give knowledge when you don't have an understanding. Do you remember me saying that? I said to change ourselves effectively, we first had to change our perceptions. We need to seek first to understand and then to be understood. So how are we going to be understood if we don't have an understanding? So focus now your time. We've got 15 minutes till we break, and I want you to think, whilst I'm talking about some of the negative self-talk, I want you to think about your negative self-talk. I'm not good enough. I'm too fat. I will never amount to anything. Whenever I'm in class in uni, all these brilliant students know everything and I'm not coping. I don't know how to cope here. I'm just going to give up. Why is it that all the girls there, look how beautiful they are? Why am I so unattractive? How can it be that everybody comes from wealthy families and I'm the only poor one here? Now, I'm sure you can hear this is very damaging to your own self. Do you remember? Look at the picture that I've left on the screen. Self-talk, you are listening. What you are saying is reinforcing the neurotransmitters in your brain. We've got neuro pathways, rather, should I say, and your neuro pathways are being thickened and being more developed as you are talking and telling yourself all about your sorry self. Remember? So we need to think before we speak to ourselves. Why don't you start changing that thought process and start saying, I didn't grow up with a lot of wealth, and that's fantastic because it has now taught me how I can be savvy with my money. I may not be the most attractive girl out here, but you know what? Looks are not important. What's most important is my attitude. I may be overweight, but I have every intention to get my health on track for myself, not because others are laughing about the way I look. If anybody else wants to write anything here, please write down some negative self-talk. It doesn't necessarily have to be your own, but just give examples. If you can write some down in the chat so we can put the positive rather than have the negative self-talk. So everybody gets the opportunity to learning from each other in this group. I hate the way I was brought up. Look at how these other ladies are so full of confidence and I have no confidence. No, I love the learning that I've experienced. It's made me the strong woman I am today. Look at all these amazing people and what they're doing. They are artists, they are lawyers, they are doctors, they are teachers, they are nurses. Why didn't I have the brains they have? You know what? I am surrounded by all these amazing intellectuals. I am going to sponge from them, and I am going to do something for myself so that I can be the best person I can be. Are you hearing the positive affirmations, the positive self-talk, opposed to the negative self-talk? I believe if we can start making changes in how we think and how we speak to ourselves, we could be better role models. We could be better citizens. We could be better teachers. We could be better wives. We could be better husbands. Do you recall the first story I told you about the wife whose self-talk was so negative about her husband, until I showed her how she could make some changes to her self-talk and maybe improve on how she treated her husband, and her marriage ended up becoming so much better. Now, that might not always be the case, because we do have some grouches of husbands and we do have some grouches of wives. However, if you try to make the difference and all else fails, you have tried. And once you have done everything you could to be the best wife or husband you can be, then at that point, you need to be serious about the choices you make. Because last week, as I was going through the acronym, A New Start, I spoke about relationships that will bring you down, which we will talk about in the future. So think about everything you do. Think about everything you think about. Am I affecting the other person? And that's not only in your relationships with your husbands and your wives, that's in your overall relationships, wherever you are, wherever you go. If you are the kind of person that has a really bad anger management problem, and you are driving on the street and someone cuts you off and your fingers are flying out your window and you're abusing and you're swearing, and in the next door car, there's a woman driving with 3 little children, and that's what they hear and that's what they see, you have taken on the role of being a really bad role model. It's not always directly associated. However, it's associated with those who absolutely are seeing you. There's a visual, they hear you and they see you. Have you ever seen how children respond to their parents? If you see children today that are swearing, I hear people say, I don't know why my children are using such foul language. Well, what's your language like at home? Your teens are saying F this and F that because they heard you say it. I never ever swore in front of my children ever, because my mother never ever swore, ever. So my children never heard me swear. I just don't swear, period. I was not brought up that way. But when I came to Australia, I was so shocked, because you hear the children, that's their language. Excuse me for this very outrageous example I'm going to give you, but this is a sentence of a teenager in a shopping center in front of little children. Hey, give me that effing drink. I'm effing thirsty. Oh, get your own effing drink. I don't have money. My effing mother didn't give it to me. Do you hear that? I hear it all the time in shopping centers, and I'm shocked, because I never heard this growing up. In fact, in Switzerland, I never heard this language either until I came to Australia 27 years ago. I was totally blown away. And I thought, where does this come from? And it scared me, and I had every right to be scared, because guess what? My children were going to the schools, and I would hear them with their friends use the same language. And I would take them into the house and I would wash their mouths out with soap, or I would put a chili. And when they were crying, I would say, I do not want to hear you say those words. And they would never say those words when I was around, but I know they would when I wasn't around. So sadly, the communities that we live in is what's going to create your children to stumble and fall. And that is why my suggestion is, people with young children, please think very seriously about sending your children to schools. You may want to start home tutoring. It is one of the best educations you can give them. As a matter of fact, if you're looking for good school teachers that can help you in your home tutoring, I know many school teachers who lost their jobs through the no jab, and they would be very willing to help you teach your children at a very minimal cost. And we can also come together, if there's many of you and you know many people, we can come together in groups and we can have classes together where we can formulate groups so that children can unite and come together and start getting the good education. All these things I'm teaching you, children should be learning how to cope, how to have confidence, how to be, have control, self-control, because they don't want to be having anger management issues like perhaps they've seen in their classrooms before with their peers, because there are many children who come from all walks of life. We can come together, congregate, and we can bring goodness to our families and our children. I would love for nothing more than to see good come out of all the teachings that I'm giving you. So let us focus on only what is positive, because your attitude is everything. If you can remember in the beginning, I said, have an attitude of gratitude, and we need to get out of the vicious cycle of the thoughts. We need to have resilience, acceptance. We need to be optimistic and be filled with gratitude. We need to have a positive mental attitude, because why? It produces positive thoughts, which can affect many areas of our life in favorable ways, if that's how we're going to live. In fact, if you can remember, I said it's going to help us with our mental health. It's going to help us with our immune systems, because many of us are struggling ill health because of how we are thinking on a daily basis, because of how we are talking to ourselves on a daily basis. So we need to come to being or accepting that we are on the wrong path. We need to accept that our mindset is not functioning optimally. And how do you come to that conclusion? Well, think about how your life is going now. Are you in control? Is someone else in control? Are other people in control? Are you able to deal with your surroundings in a way that is helping you to function optimally? Or are you just being controlled and listening to everybody because you are so living in fear, and you are full of fear? That is a lot to think about.